Hey y'all, if you are a student or client or colleague of mine, especially if we've been in some type of relationship like that over the last 4 or 5 years, you have probably heard me talk about or refer to the psychological phenomenon of coherence of mind. This is because coherence of mind is probably the psychological phenomenon that has had the most important influence on my clinical practice, my teaching practice, and my own self-understanding. And so I wanted to spend a little bit of time kind of talking a little bit more in depth about it with you today, introducing it, kind of where does it come from, and why is it useful? How is it useful? And just kind of disperse some ideas about how you might apply it to your own self-understanding and to professional context or social context that you might find it useful to apply it to. So, what is coherence of mind? Generally, this phenomenon is referring to the kind of parts coming together to form a whole in some natural or reasonable way. So developmental psychologist Mary Main, who's credited with, and we'll talk about this in more detail in a minute, but she's credited with some pretty important discoveries or sort of furthering attachment theory into adulthood. She and her colleagues who are studying adult attachment have defined coherence of mind more formally as a connection or congruity arising from some common principle or relationship. Perhaps what I want to emphasize is that when someone has gets high scores in coherence of mind, they have the ability to express sort of the connectedness of thought, such that the parts of their discourse are clearly related, form a logical whole, or are suitable or suited and adapted to context. So research over the past 30 years or so, since the mid-90s, has associated coherence of mind with secure and autonomous states of mind with regard to attachment. In other words, just sort of understanding and reflection upon experiences of caregiving or receipt of caregiving, especially in early childhood. And these secure and autonomous states of mind are also associated with favorable mental health and relational health outcomes and experiences. Coherence of mind has been measured by how well a person's narrative with regard to attachment adheres to what is known as Grice's cooperative principle and its 4 maxims. We'll get into who Grice was in a minute as well. So these 4 maxims are quality, which is defined as being truthful and having evidence for what you say. The second maxim is quantity, so be succinct yet complete. The third maxim is relation, which is referring to being relevant, or here's a big word, perspicacious, which essentially means the ability to interpret events in a accurate or in a way that's adapted to the context. And then the fourth maxim is manner. So that's referring to being clear and orderly in your expression, your storytelling. And what this is referring to is just the ability to avoid exaggeration and making of global statements like always and never. Most, if not all, forms of psychotherapy are essentially aimed at helping clients, develop coherent narratives their attachment experiences, because it is these attachment experiences that shape our relationship and experiences to our social environment. So when we provide active and reflective listening for our clients, that's what we're doing. We're essentially supporting their coherent narrative construction. And the more coherent a person's narrative, the more likely they are to demonstrate openness, cognitive and emotional flexibility, and kindness, both to themselves and to those around them. And I find it to be, especially when kind of you run a coherence test through the 4 maxims, I find it to be a very reliable epistemological tool. It's a very fancy word for, like, I use it to kind of understand, how do I know something can be considered sort of a justifiable belief, or and differentiate that between justifiable belief and sort of unsubstantiated opinion. And so I use it for self-reflection, to understand my own thoughts and emotions and behavior. I use it politically to sort through advocacy issues. I use it academically to help my students create greater coherence in the way that they're understanding the information that they're taking in from their classwork and their clinical experience work, and how they're synthesizing that information to their professional identity and their professional practice. So where does this phenomenon, like this name of the phenomenon, come from? So if you're familiar at all with attachment theory from the developmental psychology world especially, the names John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth will no doubt be familiar to you. So Bowlby was a psychoanalyst in Great Britain, practicing and researching and theorizing in the early part of the 20th century. The 1930s to the 1950s was when kind of his, if I'm not mistaken, his heyday. And he is credited with first positing that there was a identifiable attachment behavioral system that, children from infancy to the launch into adulthood use to get their sort of altricial needs met. So it's essentially kind of the things that they can't do on their own as they're developing. They use this system to explore the world from their secure base of their caregivers, and then return to a safe haven to those caregivers when something occurs in their life that they need help feeling safe from, feeling soothed, as their kind of emotions or they're aroused in some way, and then also making sense of what is going on in the world. So this process is observable in any local playground, right? So you can go to like a playground and watch the children kind of interacting with their parents. Pay close attention to when children kind of create distance from their parent. There you go, play on the equipment or whatever the case may be, and then like, especially if someone like slips and falls and like maybe bumps their knee or something like that, they'll come back to the caregiver, and then the caregiver, in an ideal situation, will sort of scoop them up, perhaps, conveying like, I got you, you're safe, and they'll sort of demonstrate that they'll mirror the child's affect, like, oh, yes, and they'll narrate the story like, of kind of what happened, like, oh, you fell down and went boom, you hurt your knee, oh, yes, that makes sense to me, I understand that, it doesn't scare me, I know what to do about this, and I can, and kind of create some organization in the child's sort of implicit experience to what's going on, and this is something we can manage together, right? When this goes really well, okay, and it doesn't have to go perfectly. When this goes well, what ends up happening is you have securely attached children who can be sort of open, flexible, and kind most of the time with most people in most places, right? And this persists into adulthood, into more autonomous states. Essentially, if this goes well and stays going well, adults can kind of do this process internally for themselves, right? This is the coherence of mind that is then expressed in adulthood. So Mary Ainsworth was a student of Bowlby's, and she developed the strain situation procedure, which then was used in cross-cultural research and demonstrated that, there was some practical validity to what Bowlby was theorizing about. That, the children, whether they live in Botswana or in Baltimore, sort of demonstrate this sort of behavioral system of exploring the world, returning home for safety, soothing, and sense making. And then Mary Main was a student of Mary Ainsworth. And Ainsworth, during her research, identified essentially three sort of main attachment pattern categories: secure, and then there's a couple of insecure sort of expressions or patterns, sort of anxious, resistant, or avoidant. You may have heard of those things described. Main identified a fourth category, which was named a disorganized pattern. Mary Main also identified that through her own research that these attachment patterns persist into adulthood. And if you can assess a parent's attachment pattern from the adult attachment perspective, you can predict the infant or childhood attachment patterns at a 75% success rate, which is an unheard of sort of strength of correlation. So her research is incredibly influential to the field of psychotherapy. And I would also want to mention that her research also has shown that people can earn security. So she identified that there was a subset of participants in her research who had childhood experiences that were typically more closely associated with insecure attachment patterns, like ambivalent or anxious, resistant, and avoidant, and maybe even disorganized. But their narratives of these experiences had greater coherence of mind. So she sort of termed that these folks were people that had earned security. They'd done the work to kind of create coherence in what was otherwise a chaotic childhood or experience of caregiving. And it really, I think, points directly at the effectiveness and potential of effectiveness for psychotherapy. So all that to say, Mary Main, especially in her research, she developed the adult attachment interview, which is sort of, in an oversimplified way, sort of the adult version of the strain situation. She was the one that identified through this adult attachment interview that the association of coherence of mind and secure autonomous attachment patterns, and that's what what I'm talking about to you is based on. Howard and Miriam Steele at the New School in Manhattan, they were students of Main's, and they taught me at a adult attachment interview symposium in the summer of 2020. And so Main, who was a contemporary of Paul Grice, who was a philosopher of language at the University of California at Berkeley, And so Maine applied Grice's cooperative principle to the study of adult states of mind with regard to attachment and found the associations between coherence of mind and secure autonomous states and cognitive, emotional, and behavioral patterns. And so that's kind of where this idea, the naming of the phenomenon comes from. And again, back to its usefulness. So because coherence of mind has been shown to be the greatest predictor of a person's state of mind with regard to attachment, I'm always attempting to find it in the narratives of psychotherapy and or family therapy clients, students, especially when they are writing about experiences in their family of origin. One of the main classes I teach is family systems and its application to psychotherapy. And so my students are often writing a family of origin analysis paper. And so I'm looking for coherence of mind in these papers to a certain extent. And I'm also using it in personal and social experiences like spiritual practice and politics. And when I can sense that there's some violation of quality, quantity, relation, and or manner in the narrative of something that I'm working with or a phenomenon that I'm working with, is a signal to me that I need to investigate further. And in the right context, intervene to improve the adherence of the person's state of mind to the cooperative principle and to these maxims, in the interest of their improving mental and relational health. So that is sort of a deeper dive into why I keep bringing up coherence of mind in therapy, in class, at dinner parties. And I hope you find it valuable. Would be happy to hear from you in the comments or by other means about what ideas this phenomenon sparks in you, and how you're applying it to your specific context. Thanks for being here. Thanks for listening.